I am going to show you how we can take the techniques that we've learned thus far, pinch forming and coiling, and how to combine those forms to gain height and width within your next sculpture. So I'm going to show you how just using minimal materials, mostly just clay and your hands, you can achieve height like this 14-inch combined vessel sculpture, which is hollow down on the inside, so I can put flowers and water in there, but it actually has a foot on it capping off the bottom so that it won't leak. Here we go. You can make this sculpture using clay and your hands. You don't need any additional tools beyond that. If you have a sponge and a pin tool or a butter knife or any kind of knife, that will be beneficial, but not necessary. So like we talked about in the early pinch forming days, in order to get a really successful pinch pot, you want to make sure that you're starting with a perfect sphere. I'm going quickly for this demonstration, but I'm using the actual tabletop to remove any wrinkles, cracks, lumps, bumps in the clay, kind of rolling it all around to try and get that perfectly spherical before I open up the vessel. If you take the time to do that, it's going to definitely pay off in the end. Again, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to move through this pretty quickly, but once you have a perfect sphere, you can go ahead and put your thumb right into the center of the clay without going through the clay, and you can start to open that clay up. Just a refresher on pinch forming, you want to go slow, and you're going to rotate the clay between your thumb and your index fingers, staying down where the floor meets the wall, and working your way up the clay. I've developed this technique where I roll it on the hard tabletop and I can sort of press the clay against the flat table, and the results are so smooth and symmetrical. I can't get enough of this technique. Again, slowly working my way up to the lip. Any cracks, you want to make sure you burnish out those cracks. Cracks are a sign of weakness in the clay. You can't have those if you want a stable structure. Smoothing, checking for any wrinkles or cracks or blemishes, and continue to roll it on the table. Give it a gentle tap tap and level it off. That's all there is to it. Pretty even hemisphere all around. For this project, you're going to create 4 pinch forms, which we're going to add coils to combine them and gain height and width. So I'm going to go ahead and make 4 pinch forms. I'm going to speed this up a little bit so you don't have to watch the entire thing. And as you watch this video, you can pause it where you need to until you can catch up to this point. If you notice your lip is a little uneven, you can flip your pinch form over and gently tap the lip to try and level that out. Now, it's important to play with your work. When you have 2 pinch forms, see what it looks like when you combine them. This will gauge if you're aiming for roughly the same size, same diameter. You can compare the two and see if they complement one another. They may not, and that's not a big deal. Once I have 2 set aside, I'm going to proceed to go ahead and add some coils to gain some height to these. Because you're just beginners, you might not have maximum height, maximum width on your early pinch forms. So if you take a large coil of clay and roll it on the table, I might make this look easy. The first couple times you do this, it tends to get a little blocky. Even mine does, the longer it gets. But take your time, try to just feel the clay and press where it might be too blocky and round out the edges. Once it gets a little too long, you can break it in half and continue to roll it to have a bit more manageable piece of clay. You're looking for even thickness throughout the piece of clay and a nice workspace to work on. Plenty of room. You don't have to go for perfectionism here. Now, if you want to just go straight up, you would stack it straight on top like this. If you wanted to gain width, you would put it on the outer edge of the lip like this. And if you wanted to go more narrow, you would put it on the inside of the lip like this. I'm going to go ahead and go further out because I want to gain height on my vessel. I'm making the coil a little extra long, and I'm overlapping it on the edge, and I'm cutting it with a pin tool carefully. So you want to make sure you sort of slice right through there without going through your vessel. Take out the extra clay, blend this together carefully, gentle pressure. Get rid of that crack. Blend the inside, just enough to get it securely attached. Working your way around the piece, rotating the piece. I'm working quickly here for demonstration purposes, but I do want you to take your time and then proceed to the outside of the piece. Wet clay to wet clay, you should be able to get away with this pretty quickly, pretty easily, to just blend the clay. Once you have it pretty securely attached, you can then go ahead and try and smooth it out on the flat part of the tabletop. And I'm doing the exact same thing with the other piece that's on the table, rolling out my coil and adding it to my vessel to gain some height. This is obviously sped up in this video. I don't want you working this fast. For demonstration purposes, I wanted to be mindful of your time. And then when you line up the two, again, because we did the exact same thing, they line up pretty well together. I'm not going to combine those just yet, though. I'm going to put them aside and I'm going to continue on to making a couple more vessels. Okay, now that I have my 4 vessels, it's time to start adding some coils to gain some height on these vessels and think about starting to combine them. So when you think you have a coil that's long enough, you're going to measure it and see if it fits. This does not fit. So you need to go back and either start a new coil or see if you can stretch the existing coil out a little bit longer to fit the proper diameter of the vessel that you're matching it up to. There we go. Much better. That didn't take long. Remember, when you line them up, you're going to overlap them slightly and slice through. We don't rip the clay. We slice the clay. Take off the extra and blend. I want you to remember this handy tabletop technique when you're blending your coils. This will help keep the structure in place and not be so flimsy. Take your time, work your way around the piece. Don't be rough with your piece. Don't slam it on the table too hard. I might be slamming mine on the table too hard. And then it's time to play a little bit. Do these two line up well together? If they do, go ahead and blend them together gently without pressing too firm, or else you'll collapse the piece. Again, wet clay to wet clay should blend pretty well and you should have some success. Once they get a bit leather hard, you would have to slip and score, but I worked so quickly during this demonstration I was able to just blend them together, and now I'm gently rolling that seam along the table to see if I can blend that more. Now I want you to spend a good 10-20 minutes blending this clay. I'm going to move on and show you the next step. Flatten, make sure it's nice and level on the table, and then play again. After you combine them, you need to stop and step back for a minute and decide if you like the way that looks. If you do like the way that looks, you can permanently adhere them together. You can slip and score them together. You could add a coil to get them to stick together. You can just stack them, but then you are trapping air inside, so that's fine if you do that. You just have to put a vent hole in there. The vent hole just has to be the size of a pin tool, or you can make a larger opening if you want to go ahead and put flowers and water in it like I am going to do with mine. So there's a few ways you can get these to stick together. If it's wet clay to wet clay, you can just go ahead and blend that clay together. If you want to open up the inside so you can put flowers and water inside, now's the time to do that. With mine, I decided to add a coil just for maximum stability.
coiling it out, making sure it fits around the entire diameter. You'll see this first time around, it actually does not fit around the whole vessel. You want to be able to blend the coil half into the top hemisphere, half into the bottom hemisphere. So I have to go back and extend my coil so that it does wrap all the way around the piece. And there you have it. Wraps all the way around. Trim off any extra. Try not to slice through your vessel. You can just use your fingers, but if you have a wooden modeling tool or a popsicle stick, it's a little easier to blend half into the top hemisphere and half into the bottom hemisphere. You want to remove any evidence of that coil being there. I'm working quickly just to give you an idea of what we're doing here, but I want you to slow it down and take your time. Okay, we have our last pinch pot. Do we like it on top like that? Stepping back from the work, trying to decide if you like that. I'm actually not sure I like that. So I might set that aside and think about it some more. In the meantime, maybe I want to add some handles. Do I like that? Still trying to think about it. Not sure. Again, put it aside, think about it. I'm going to work on some handles and see if that changes how the piece looks. There's lots of ways to make handles. For time's sake, I'm just going to show you to make a coil, trim off the ends, clean it up, and play. It's really important, once again, to sketch out of clay. Step back. Do you like the way that looks? Is it straight? Now remember I said your design might change quite a bit from your initial sketch, and that's okay. So here I am, you're witnessing me live playing with this. I feel like this almost looks like a picture. So I'm going to pull a little bit here and create a spout, step back from the piece, and see if I like the way that looks. Maybe I take that piece sitting on the table and I put it underneath it for a foot to gain height, because we are going for 12 inches tall, and if I measure this, you'll notice it's not 12 inches tall, it's only about 9 inches tall. So here I am sketching. Do I like the look of a handle? Do I like the look of a spout? Do I want to add a second handle? And what happens when we measure it? About 9 inches tall. We're trying to go for 12. So I think a good idea would be to put that extra pinch pot on the bottom of it as a foot. So play and sketch, and remember to put your initials on the bottom of your work, especially if we're remote. I won't know whose is whose without those initials.
And promise me this, if you've decided to make a handle, make sure that you're stepping way back from the piece and making sure it's exactly lined up in the center where you want it. If you have a spout, you want to make sure it's directly across from the spout. And just because you've made something and put it on there does not mean you have to commit to that. Feel free to rip it off and try something new. It's okay to play and sketch and clay and change your mind.